I'm Catherine Kingsley.
And I'm Catherine Stern.
And this is
Contemplating Culture,
a missionary walk through a secular age. Together we journey through A Secular Age by Charles Taylor, a book looking at the history and philosophy of how the world got where it is, and the impacts of our contemporary culture for us today as missionaries.
And we're inviting you to join the conversation.
Hello and welcome to Contemplating Culture.
Hello everyone.
So in today's episode we're looking at polite society, and we're talking specifically here about the progression we've been on, and we're looking at, 18th century elite aristocracy.
So if you grew up with this stuff, think Jane Austen, Mr. Darcy and Pride and Prejudice and the do's and don'ts of how you behave in public.
That's definitely what I was thinking of as I was reading this. It became quite visual for me how focused society was on doing the right external things, having the right social interactions. That's definitely, the idea that Taylor kind of paints for us of what's going on here. But I guess even before we get to here, maybe Kat, you could just show us the journey of why this might have emerged.
Well, I was reading this and thinking it's quite a move from, I know Taylor doesn't start here, but I remember reading early church history and being quite confronted by stories of the early fathers of the church, in the Council of Nicaea, for instance, and they'd be pulling each other's beards and actually getting quite physical in their disagreement with one another. And I was horrified because I'm a product of this polite society and you don't express disagreement in a physical manner.
Yeah.
Anymore. But I guess if we look at the progression of history, we went from bishops solving their difficulties with their fists and with their influence with the emperor to solving their difficulties, post-Reformation with the sword, the Crusades. It's not a very nice era of how we chose to deal with difference, but you can understand then how the modern moral order emerges out of, we just can't keep going this way.
Yeah. And there's something here of instead of using their swords to cut through, they start using their words, and rhetoric and social interaction starts to take hold. So I guess we see the shift from, your medieval warrior to now your aristocrats are dedicated to the art of peace. So they're dedicating themselves to productivity, to commerce, and then also, as we see in the works of Jane Austen, the finer arts, to literature, conversation, philosophy, that these things are now more valued, and you're seen as, a more civilized person the more you engage in these things. That the goal becomes peace and self-improvement in the arts, as opposed to skill with the sword.
And I guess also that the thing to be avoided is to be cut from society, which still sits today, cancel culture. The thing I don't want is to say or do the wrong thing and be cut out by polite society.
And Taylor says one of the things that characterises polite manners that emerge in this era is that treating of the other as an independent agent that is capable of exchange for mutual benefit. So this idea of mutual benefit, and of course, at this point, we're still only talking about the elites. Not everyone is your equal here, but in that level. And it's both on the level of, as I talked about, the two kind of things that are happening here is productivity and commerce. So exchanging for mutual benefit in terms of money, but also in the fine arts. So conversation is also an exchange for mutual benefit.
And it's interesting because the assumption of my equality with you that sits underneath that is something that we would see as very good. At the same time as holding in balance with that I only see you as a source of something that I can get out of you. I only interact with you for what I can get out of you for my own benefit. And I know that you're not going to do anything for me that's not for your benefit. In the gain of this sense of social equality, of seeing the other as an independent entity, but as one who will only act for personal gain. Something of generosity, something of our humanity, I think, and of the beauty of our humanity, of what we would say love is, that we lose in this process. In these movements, we often move towards something that I would say is objectively better. In the process of that gain, we lose something that is beautiful and important as well.
Yeah. So in this era, it's where this modern moral order is taking hold, and there's 3 signs of it that Taylor talks about that I think we should be able to recognise because we're now living within it. But this is, I guess, the period where it emerges. The first one is similar to what I mentioned before. So the importance given to individual freedom and the independence of the other in social interactions. The second one being social exchange for mutual benefit, so that when we are exchanging, as we're saying, it's about mutual benefit. And the third one being the high place now given to commerce and productivity. And this takes hold in such a way, like the modern moral order, polite society becomes so tangible that it reaches a point where it now can't be overruled by what I guess the church would say, what a certain government might say, that it's held with a tangibility in society. Taylor says that it's so normative that it can't be overruled.
It's like we've got a new set of rules for society, and the rules are, this is the public square, this is who can speak and how interactions can happen, and everything else has to sit outside of that.
And so that then becomes a source of conflict, or I guess this whole field of conflict, because there are some major players in the game, and one of them being, I guess, church authority. And so Taylor talks about what emerges then is this period of tension between, it's not like it's over, between polite society and Christianity. And so in this 18th century, there's, well, if I want to protect this, as you're calling it, the public square, this place where our social interactions are happening, from interventions from outside, one of the things that starts to happen is that Orthodox Christianity or streams of religion start to be labelled, degraded, so that they can be kept to the sidelines. And he talks about them as dangerous. So the first category of dangerous things is dangerous religion. So how you practice your religion can be dangerous. So it might be dangerous because of superstition. So this is the idea that there's an enchanted element to your religion, to your cults and practices and all the things that you're carrying out. And particularly, I guess, the carrying on of the Protestant attack against the Catholic religion of sacramentals and things like that, that there's anything beyond what I can interact with in the here and now, beyond what's reason, anything like that. So the second one is fanaticism. So in here we're talking about being so firmly held in a belief system that it gives you license to go beyond this communal order of mutual benefit that's established. And the third kind of dangerous religion he talks about is enthusiasm. So this is like a certainty that I'm hearing God's voice and I can act on that, what I'm hearing, without needing to go to any external authority or thing like that. So these kind of things are labelled as dangerous religion.
I think we just named ourselves as dangerous.
Oh, I think we're dangerous on all 3 accounts, probably.
Oh, I'm thinking, like, going back to that whole Jane Austen image, like what we're seeing is that religion, or acceptable religion, and religion is acceptable in this polite society as long as it's what I would call watered down and not serious. It's something that, church is something that good people do on a Sunday. Religion is what makes you people with politeness and manners, and good people have religion or faith, but it's a very private thing. It's not something that we talk about, and it's got to fit a whole set of parameters that includes not being Catholic, not being Methodist, or any sort of, they didn't have them in those days, but Pentecostal or somebody like that, which took you outside of these particular agreed, in a silent kind of way, parameters of what is okay and what really essentially is not going to cause us to be living in this state of potential another war because these people have decided to kill each other because they're fanatical about their faith or whatever.
Yeah, and you can see that in that mindset, when peace is your goal, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to take anything too seriously that you would cause conflict for it. And I guess it's also dangerous if you're following something that I can't understand or can't see. And so we look at the different elements. So another kind of dangerous thing that he talks about is dangerous dogma. So here he's talking about, like if you're living for a happiness beyond the here and now, you're kind of dangerous to our productivity and the order that we're establishing here. Another one he talks about is submission to truths regarded as revelation. So anything that's outside of reason, as I was saying, stuff that I can't understand by reason becomes dangerous, because who knows how reliable your source of revelation is.
And we can't control it. That's the other thing, that this public square, which has everything neatly ordered and controlled, has no way of speaking into except fighting back with reason against any of this stuff.
So another kind of category that some of the writers of this time talk about is dangerous behaviour. So dangerous behaviour here might be dampening of patriotic spirit. So anything that's going to dampen that spirit, anything that's going to turn you away from industry, marriage, public affairs, the things that are good.
Like poverty, chastity and obedience.
Yep, once again, we're in the dangerous category. And anything causing division. So division within a family, within a city, within a kingdom, anything division causing.
So when we're talking about anything that dampens patriotism, we've got a specific definition of patriotism here. We're not talking nationalism that is going to be willing to fight the country next door for territory.
Because the war now is in the economic space. So what I want to be doing is to be supporting the development of my country, not in a military sense, but in the sense of the arts, in the sense of the economy, things like that. So that's, I think, what he's talking about here in terms of patriotic spirit, is things that are going to further my country in this new modern moral order. And so some of the responses, I guess, to this tension that then starts to sit between politeness and Christianity, Taylor kind of says there's three kind of responses that emerge. One of them is striving to accommodate, to find the place of tolerance where whatever we need to do to make sure that there's no more fighting. Another response was the critique of politeness. And I guess its descendant, as we would encounter it now, is probably the critique of political correctness, that you must do what's polite, and then there's a critique of that actually maybe there's more to the story here. And then the other kind of third angle of response being, I'm just going to reject you and your Orthodox Christianity. So rejecting one side, rejecting the other side, or doing anything you can to kind of bring about tolerance.
And this tolerance is really the world that we live in right now, isn't it? This idea that you can have religion, but keep it private, keep it within the limits that we consider acceptable. We won't discuss difference. And I'm just going to stand a little bit distant and disengaged from what you really think or what you really believe, because any kind of conflict or disagreement between us could be awkward and make one or both of us feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think this is what I spend a lot of time, people coming to me with these kind of questions of, I'm in this situation or I'm in this situation. And if you're listening, you probably have that situation in your mind of, like I'm in a relationship with someone and we stay in the polite space because tolerance is the value that we've been brought up on, and it's like a social suicide to move beyond it.
Or not even a social suicide, but the end of a friendship or the end of a relationship, because we're not very hardy in that way anymore. Like relationships don't seem to be able to push past disagreement.
When I'm thinking, I guess, how to respond to these kind of questions, I love, there was one bit that Taylor was talking about that we mentioned earlier, this idea that what emerges here is the independence of the other in social interactions, their freedom. And when we talk about freedom, I guess we're really honouring the dignity of the other. And I guess it just makes me think that maybe there's space for us to reclaim that's maybe one of the ways that we can move forward, so that, because effectively what happens in a polite society is I'm holding within myself all of my thoughts and beliefs, and you're holding in yourself all of your thoughts and beliefs, and we put out the acceptable ones to make sure that there's no conflict into a mutual third space. And you can see that this is what's happening, I guess, in the salons and tea houses of the 18th century. And now it might be, you know, like in your car rides or in your chat rooms or whatever it might be. But there's this external space of conversation where I'm putting out there only the things that are going to be okay. And in that space, we start to lose, I guess that's one of the consequences of the buffered self, that this is how we interact, but we start to lose a sense of intimacy, of what's personal, of what's real. And you can see that then there's this hunger in society and people for authenticity and things like that. But then when people are authentic, they don't know how to deal with the emotions that rise up in them. And so even though there's this buzzword of resilience that goes around, as you're saying, I think we really don't have a lot of skills in resilience in relationships.
Like also resilience still feels, I don't know, like a step removed from, we were talking before about vulnerability and intimacy. And I guess the word vulnerability and intimacy suggests something a step further in even from resilience, because it allows the possibility that you might say things and do things that hurt me and potentially hurt me deeply, but I'm going to choose to stay engaged in this relationship. I'm going to choose to stay vulnerable and real because I love you. And that's actually what real love is like. Like I'm thinking of a friendship I have where back when we were in our early 20s and even through our 20s, this friend and I guess the friendship grew out of a space of mutual faith and engagement with our faith. And we had this great capacity to share deeply at a spiritual level what was going on in our relationships with God. And I really valued that friendship and the ability to talk like that. And what happened in our 30s is that my friend started on a journey which has taken her further and further away from what I might describe as Orthodox Christianity. And I've experienced it on my side as a painful one, both painful in watching her walk away from things that I value deeply. Also painful in that her inability to hold any longer the fact that some of these things are still important and deeply valued in my life, so that if I share on some of these things, it can trigger wounds or things in her that make her angry. And so the instinctive reaction in me is don't talk about these things. But I realized at one point that if I value this friendship, if I want to keep this friendship and I want to keep it at the level that we've had it before, I actually need to develop not so much resilience, but the capacity to be vulnerable and sustain those wounds and continue to walk with her. I'm not sure, like it is a kind of resilience, but I feel like resilience still suggests some sort of buffering to me. And there's something in the invitation to accept that in real love, in real human relationships, there will be conflict and it will hurt. People will get angry. People will misunderstand one another. But the difference is that we're not choosing to walk away. There's not a level beyond which you can't go and this friendship will no longer exist.
And I think a really good example for us of this is Jesus. Jesus, I don't think set out to offend, but people took offense. It didn't stop him loving. Like he was able to love and offend at the same time, like this magical little kind of balance. And I guess one of the other things we learned from Jesus is that everything is situational, that we couldn't set out a bunch of rules for ourselves, let alone for you, of how to be authentically Christian in a polite society. I can give you tips of things that you could try, but effectively, you know, like it's a process of learning. But I guess that's the one thing that I reckon would be a great takeaway, is to just return to the dignity of the other. As you were saying, Kat, that because you know the person, you are always looking to return the relationship to an exchange of persons, which is love, and that is the starting point rather than the difference or anything else. And everything else is held within that mutual honouring of the dignity of the other. And I think we can lose sight of that very, very quickly, that ideas and beliefs can become more important than the people in front of us. But I think that Jesus always honours the dignity of the other. And I think that that's maybe the greatest thing that we can be bringing into polite society, is no matter where we sit on an issue, to just being able to hold and honour and have a personal exchange with the other.
And I think for me, there's something about my reflection on the cross, on the passion of Jesus, that in that holding, he was never on the attack. You can very much see, like in the image of a naked, beaten, bruised man hanging on the cross, of somebody who had no buffering, who took everything that came his way and suffered it, and chose only to give back love, dignity, truth, that his continual chosen stance was one of vulnerability, availability. It communicates something to me of who God is for us, what God's mercy looks like, that it continues to be there, to be in relationship, no matter what we throw at it.
Yeah, I think that's good. And that's maybe a great landing spot for us today, to just, if you do have that situation or relationship in your mind, to be thinking about, how can I bring personal encounter, love, and honouring the dignity of this person into our next interaction, and how can I be, standing with Jesus in that space.
Amen.
This has been Contemplating Culture, a podcast produced by the missionaries of God's Love Sisters. For more information from today's episode, be sure to check out the show notes. We pray that today has blessed you, and most importantly, we invite you to continue the conversation.